About 3.5 years ago, well before Horizon 5 was even announced, I asked my community what features and updates they wanted to see in the next Forza Horizon. I then compiled everyone's suggestions into a nearly half-hour video showcasing my community's Horizon 5 wishlist. Well, of course, we've now had Horizon 5 in our hands for a little over 2 years, and although I do still expect to see more features get added over the coming months to maybe even years, I think it's still more than fair to judge Horizon 5 as a complete product now, and take a look at this wishlist to see how many of these suggestions made their way into Forza Horizon 5. Now, in the original video, I broke down and combined all 90 suggestions into 9 categories, and we'll keep things in that same order for this video as well, starting with audio and visual car customization. And one of the biggest requests was an improvement to car audio. This really was one of the biggest common complaints you'd hear from players in Horizon 4, especially with how common engine swaps were. And this was definitely addressed for Horizon 5. A lot of cars had their engine sounds vastly improved. The RX-7 is one of the biggest ones I can think of. We now have exhausts and intakes that change the audio as well. The car audio also reacts better to the environment by bouncing off tight spaces or echoing through canyons, so it's much more dynamic. All in all, the car audio is a major improvement. Now, there are still some complaints, they do still kind of fall into the trap of making every car with the same engine sound exactly the same, and engine swaps are still pretty popular, which means a lot of cars do sound really similar, but to be honest, this is even a problem in real life, where everyone kind of groans at the LS swap meta. There are a couple of other minor nagging issues with Horizon 5's car audio, but I do think across the board it's been a major improvement and is at least good enough for the vast majority of cars in the game. I'm checking this one off as a big win for Playground. Now, number 2 on the list is one that I really wish we had in Horizon 5, but it still eludes me: Underglow. This has kind of fallen out of favor in all racing games besides Need for Speed, and it's definitely only popular in certain subsections of the car scene, but I think this would theoretically be a fairly simple thing to develop that could add a lot of character and personalization to Horizon's cars. But no luck for Underglow. I'll move that one into the Horizon 6 wishlist. Unfortunately, we continue the losses here with the request to add vinyls and decals to car windows, which sadly still has not been introduced. Unlike with Underglow, this is one that I actually really expected them to add for Horizon 5. I think conceptually, again, it's fairly easy to develop, but when you have a car roster topping out over 800 vehicles, maybe in reality it's a pretty extreme amount of work. Nonetheless, this is a huge part of real car customization. Lots of folks put stickers on their windows along with windshield banners and whatever else, and I still really want to see this in Forza. Now, the next request is going to come as no surprise: better Forza Aero. Yes, we've been asking for changes to this for years, and unfortunately, even the brand new Forza Motorsport still has the exact same ugly wing and front splitter. Right around Horizon 5's launch, we did see some cars that got new wing options, like the BCL wing for a lot of drift cars, and I thought that this would maybe lead to us getting more and more options, but that was kind of just abandoned. This one needs to get updated for Horizon 6, and hopefully Playground finally understands that. Now, this has been a pretty rough category with only one win so far, and we've got yet another unanswered request from Horizon 4 players: customizable exhaust tips. Again, I think this just runs into that issue of having so many cars that modeling decent looking mufflers for all of them would be immensely time consuming, without adding too much to the gameplay as a whole. This one doesn't really bother me like the Forza Aero does, and I certainly didn't expect it to come to the game, but it would be a nice bonus to see. Now, part of this request was also tunable exhaust sounds, and this one I'm gonna say was kind of answered. Like we brought up earlier, you can change the sound sound of most cars by changing their exhaust upgrade level, as well as intake, cams, and forced induction to a lesser degree. Now, the bummer is that the audio is still tied directly to the performance mods you have installed. So if you want the race exhaust, you need to accept that sound as well. But I'm kind of okay with that, and I understand the logic behind it. I do think, sure, it'd be cool to get some more customization freedom here, but again, it's pretty low on my list. And our next request is similarly a bit of a mixed bag, but I'm leaning towards the wish granted side on this one. Horizon 4 players wanted an improved livery editor. And we have seen some notable changes in Horizon 5 with a light UI refresh, some great QOL changes, and better freedom to adjust finishes between glossy and matte, for example. Horizon's livery editor is easily one of the best out there, but I don't think it's evolved quite as much as it could have over previous games, and there are still some very highly requested features that have been left on the table for years. So I'm calling this one a bit of a 50-50. Now we have yet another mixed result here with the request to add more car RP features to Horizon. Things like turn signals, window control, and convertibles. Of course, with Horizon 5, many cars do now have mode switches, including the ability to take the top down in some convertibles, which is great. I do wish this came to more cars. There are still some that don't have this ability, but it is absolutely an improvement and a request partially answered. Now, to wrap up this category with some quickfire suggestions, interior customization was on the list, with the ability to change seats, colors, steering wheels, and so on. Of course, this is not in Horizon 5, but players wanted more body kits in Horizon as well, and we got those. Horizon 5 now has a pretty healthy number of third-party kits, especially with the reintroduction of Rocket Bunny. So I'd say that's a win. Next up, and this one was delivered on heavily, more rim choices. I can't remember what our wheel count is at now, but I think we're closing in on something like 400 different rim styles in Horizon 5, which is honestly incredible. Huge win for this one. And that does wrap up the request list for aesthetic car customization in Horizon 5. Let's take a look at the scoreboard. Currently, I'd say we are at 4 feature requests that have been answered in Horizon 5, 2 that have been only partially answered, and 5 that remain missing entirely. And that brings us on to Category 2, Performance Car Customization. The biggest request here was for an improvement and rebalancing of the PI system. And this one is tough to answer. The system does still work in the same way, and a lot of similar PI efficiency building mentality does still exist, but across the board, I would still say that Horizon 5 has done a much better job of having a wider variety of good cars within each class. And they've heavily nerfed things like the all-wheel drive meta that was so prevalent in 4. These days, many purist builds are still entirely competitive. Rear-wheel drive is very strong, front-wheel drive works great in lower classes, and in general, I just think players have a lot more flexibility in their build choice. So I'm marking this one as partially addressed. The PI system still has its quirks, like heavily undervaluing front downforce because it doesn't account for tuning, overvaluing front tire width, rear downforce often dropping PI, struggling to get tire compound PIs right, and whatever else. But again, the overall balance and building freedom is still improved. Next up on the list, in a similar vein, was the request to allow for downforce tuning on more stock and aftermarket aero. This is something that has been lightly addressed. Some cars do have adjustable stock aero or non-Forza aftermarket aero, but the vast majority of cars in the game do still need Forza aero to unlock downforce tuning. So even though I could maybe put this one in the mixed category, I'm going to say that no, this hasn't really been addressed as much as people would like. Next on our list is kind of a cool one, the request to have a custom tuning track. And I'm going to mark this one as answered, largely because of the event lab. This has allowed players to build their own test tracks with custom rule sets and variables, and it's awesome. We also do have the Horizon Mexico circuit, which I think for a lot of people kind of acts as the open world quick test track. And then there is even an official test track in the game that lets you upgrade parts and adjust tuning on the road. Unfortunately, it's not really a track and has all these obstacles all over and no support for lap time testing or deltas or anything. So at least to me, it isn't really that useful. I really wish we could get this functionality though applied to any track we wanted in the game. Now for some quickfire suggestions, people wanted more engine swaps, and I'd say that's been delivered. People wanted more suspension and tire options too, and we did see that with drift and off-road race tires being added, alongside tire profile for some off-road cars, but no real additions to suspension, so I'll call that one mixed. And finally, the often requested ECU tuning has still not been added. Things like timing adjustments, fuel mixtures, boost pressure, and so on. This one has always been pretty low on my list, but I always hear it mentioned, and I think it could be cool to get some more detailed power band tuning in Horizon 6. And that wraps up our list of feature requests for performance mods. Let's take another look at the scoreboard here, where we've got an even split across 2 answered requests, 2 mixed bags, and 2 features still not added. Next up then is the major feature category. Just kind of like a grab bag of big things players wanted to see in Horizon 5. And we start off with the request for a drifting rivals mode. We've got road racing, rally, drag, and cross-country rivals, but no rivals for drifting. All the competition there really just happens through PR stunt leaderboards, or maybe online, which isn't too popular. But I would still really like to see something like a rivals mode for drift scoring. I think the drifting community is pretty big in Horizon, and more support for competitive drifting would be a great idea. Next up, people wanted a custom music radio station that you could hook into just a music folder or Spotify or whatever other app of your choice. And we actually had this to a degree in Horizon 4, but only for Groove Music, which is dead anyway, and has not been replaced for Horizon 5. Now this next one really hurts because it's something that's been really high on my list for ages, and I think Horizon 5 dropped the ball on it in a lot of ways. We're talking about car meets. Of course, these can happen in the open world, but you're limited to 12 players max, can't get out of your car at all to look around, and the open world player phasing still for some reason does not prioritize convoy members, so you'll likely struggle to have everyone be able to see everyone else. This is something that was kind of done better in previous games. We used to have official car meet spots, and as late as Horizon 3 had the drag strip area where you could meet up with and race other players in a sort of Street Wars car meet style. And you could also form private open world lobbies with just your convoy. And I really think we should have gotten more innovation and official game support for big car meets and better social interaction in Horizon 5. However, one thing high on the wish list for many that I will say I think has really improved for Horizon 5 is actually the story. A lot of people wanted better stories. Now they aren't God of War level storytelling masterpieces by any means, but they're good, lighthearted fun. In my opinion, the main campaign is better, and pretty much all of the Horizon stories are improved as well, with more gameplay variety and often better writing. I still wouldn't say at all that the story is a highlight feature of Horizon 5, but it is an improvement over 4. Now let's quickfire through some more here, starting with VR support, which of course is not in Horizon 5, no big surprises there. Then we've got pink slip races, still not in Horizon 5, but come on, this would be so cool, especially considering how easy it is to get cars anyway, but also how rare some of the other timed exclusive cars can be. And to wrap us up for big feature changes is something that a lot of creators have wanted, a better replay mode. Sadly, this has not really been touched at all for Horizon 5. I would love it if we had more cameras, better speed control, the ability to fly the drone in replays or set up camera splines. There's a lot that could be addressed here to allow for better video editing, but unfortunately this really hasn't changed much at all. And that brings us to our small features and kind of QOL stuff category. The top request here was the ability to custom label or tag or otherwise better sort cars. And this is actually something I've been really trying to advocate for in Horizon 5 because we still don't have this. With so many cars in the game and so many different things to do with those cars, I really would love it if we could create our own tags or categories for rally favorites, drift build favorites, rivals, PvP builds, and so on. Next up though was improvements to the auction house and making it more engaging, important, and fun to buy cars at auction. This is another feature though that has remained unchanged from Horizon 4. On this note, players have wanted to gift cars to friends, and this still doesn't really exist. We do have the gift drop system, and Secret Santa sorta works for this, but is of course time limited, so I could label this one as partially answered, but realistically, you still cannot gift or trade cars with friends in Horizon. So next on the list was more search and sort options for leaderboards, things like filtering by drivetrain or sorting by date, but we don't have any extra options here from past Horizon games. Now we've kind of had a string of losses here, so let's bring it back with better wheel support. Guys, wheels sucked in Horizon 4, and they are so much better now. This was a huge win. Wheels are finally usable and even competitively viable in the game now, which is fantastic. And we've got another big win to follow. Players wanted a better route creator with custom props, and boy did we get that. Event Lab has been a massive success for Horizon 5, especially recently, and I think it's just going to keep getting better. Now, here's another one that I really wish we got in Horizon 5 and even Motorsport: car-specific assists. The ability to set things like ABS or launch control per car would be fantastic, but has still not yet been added. Another request was to make Forza Edition cars more unique and iconic. And I would say that this has maybe been lightly addressed because we do now have things like the Anniversary Edition Viper or the Donut Edition Supervan. But by and large, I would actually say that if anything, Forza Edition cars are less important than they were in previous games. So I wouldn't really say that this has been addressed fully. Now here's one that's actually a bit of a hot topic. In Horizon 4, a lot of players really wanted money to be harder to come by. They wanted currency to be more meaningful, and I would actually say that they addressed this in Horizon 5. Money does flow slower in FH5 than it did in FH4, but people are really split about this. Many people were really upset about the wheel spin nerfs and the aggressive money exploit squashing through things like AFK Goliath or perk rewards, while on the other hand, many players are still sitting on hundreds of millions of credits with nothing to spend it on. So this has absolutely been addressed and changed in Horizon 5, but whether or not it's for the best is up for debate. And that wraps up our kind of overall grab bag feature category. Not a lot has been addressed here, but there have been a few major improvements. This brings up our added feature count by a total of 4, with improved wheel support, Event Lab, story improvements, and changes to currency. We don't have anything here that I would truly consider mixed, and then we are adding 12 feature requests to the still missing category. This one definitely tipped the scales a bit, but we're about to jump into the racing and online experience categories, where things get even more interesting. The big request here was better AI, and I don't really know where to put this one. It's definitely seen some changes. It changed a lot in Horizon 5 after launch with some difficulty tweaks, but overall, I just don't think the AI is really much better. And especially when they're brought into online events like the trial, they behave super erratically and still obviously cheat the physics. However, and this was a separate suggestion, in Horizon 4, the AI always picked like the same 3 cars. You always saw that dang Ford Focus in like every single event. But now, in Horizon 5, that's largely fixed, and the AI picked from a wider variety of cars. To be honest, I just think this was a bug in Horizon 4, not really a design choice, but I'll still chalk this one up as a win. Now, we've got another positive here. Players wanted less free roam rush, or at least for it to not count towards the championship points, and this was definitely addressed. FRR has been completely removed from Horizon 5's PvP, and instead kind of lives on through the tour mode in between races, where it's actually a lot more fun. Now, this next one has always surprised me. Why do we still not have reverse layouts for tracks in Horizon? It would effectively double the track list, and some layouts are really fun when you run them in reverse. I'm not sure if there's just a technical reason why this has never been implemented, or if it's just a design choice to reduce clutter or something. Either way, there are still no reverse layouts in Horizon 5. Now, here's something I've always loved in other games that doesn't exist as much as it used to: a track voting system for multiplayer, where players are given a few options to pick from and can vote on where they want to race next. I would love this in Horizon, but as we know, multiplayer racing is not a feature that has improved much for Horizon 5. And speaking of, the next request from Horizon 4 players was for better netcode and more stable online connections. Oof. This was one of Horizon 5's biggest issues on launch and still plagues the game to this day. People don't get race invites, get dropped from the convoy, don't load in with the rest of the convoy, or can't be seen in the open world, or just crash out of the game entirely. Horizon 5's multiplayer experience is still quite unstable. Now, piggybacking off this suggestion was the request for more lobby options. Things like private open world lobbies, custom rivals events with just your convoy, or setting car restrictions for the convoy, stuff like that. And this has not really seen any improvement for Horizon 5. Now, here's an interesting one. A big request for Horizon 5 was to crack down on cheating. And I would actually say that this has been addressed. Now, unfortunately, cheating has been a major problem in Horizon 5, but I do believe that the devs have, if not a bit too slowly, started to really lock that down, clearing leaderboards, removing exploits, making it harder to use cheat software and all that. It's a much smaller issue now than it was towards the launch. So I'm calling that one a win, even though there is still more work to be done. Now, the final suggestion for online was to be more active about car balancing, things like tweaking PI and shaking up the meta more often. Horizon 4 players will actually remember that some cars were banned from competing online. That is not the case with Horizon 5, and they really haven't done much of anything to adjust car balance at all. But it's worth saying that they largely haven't needed to as much. Like I said earlier, Horizon 5 has a much wider range of competitively viable cars, so in many classes, it just isn't as big of an issue. And we do still see the meta adjust with the addition of new cars, which can sometimes be really overpowered. But I'm going to say that ultimately this has actually not been addressed, because I still would really like to see more dev intervention here to adjust PI values of under or overperforming cars. So for multiplayer, this was another category that wasn't too strong. We've got 3 improvements made with better AI car variety, the removal of FRR, and the crackdown on cheating. And then we've got 6 feature requests or improvements that have still gone unanswered. I almost want to just give them another missing feature point for flat out removing ranked racing, which I don't think any of us expected in Horizon 4, but I'll just leave that one alone. And the next category here is simple: cars. People have wanted to see more normal daily driver cars, and I would say that's been at least partially addressed. I'm actually going to call it a win for Playground. Of course, they could always add more, but we do have now a lot of slower, fun, more daily driver cars in Horizon 5. Next up, on the other end of the spectrum, people wanted race cars. And this one I'd say is a bit mixed. In the original video, I talked about players wanting things like GT3 cars, and although we don't have a lot of that, we do still have a handful of really cool race spec or prototype cars that have made their way to Horizon. So I'm giving this one a mixed result, just because I know that they have a big roster of race cars from Motorsport that they could trickle into Horizon. I really want more touring cars, for example. Now, of course, people also had some specific brand requests from makes like Dodge, Lexus, and Tesla, and although we still don't have Tesla in-game, honestly guys, Horizon 5 has so many effing cars. We're over 800 now, and still counting. So I'm gonna pass over a win here to Playground on this one, because Horizon 5 has added so many new cars from so many new brands, and I think that fits the spirit of what people wanted from Horizon 4. And we wrap up our car category with a request for better physics. And I would say this absolutely is another one Horizon 5 delivered on. They reworked the suspension and tire model, and it manages to feel more responsive and enjoyable, and even takes another step towards realism. And that's exactly what I wanted. So yeah, Horizon 5's handling is great. It's improved over Horizon 4, that's a win. So from my opinion, we've racked up another 3 wins and 1 mixed result for Horizon 5 here in the car category, and we've only got 2 categories left. Let's talk about what Horizon 4 players wanted from Horizon 5's map. First, road variety. People wanted tighter roads, more surface variation, a bigger highway, and overall just more roads. Now, I'm going to put this one in the mixed category, leaning towards positive. I mean, we got a bigger map with more roads, and there is more surface variation. And you can include Rally Adventure, which has some of the best roads in the entire series. But the lack of more distinct seasons, especially winter, throughout the whole map, lack of tighter roads, and a lack of a highway loop, which was highly requested, kind of puts this one in the mixed bag for me. Next, more car-centric infrastructure, like gas stations or parking garages. Why are there still no gas stations in Horizon 5's map? It just feels like such a no-brainer to me. Tons of people have made event labs centered around stuff like this, but we still don't have any way to fill up or park our cars in Horizon's version of Mexico. And it just feels kind of strange to drive through a car game's world and not see many buildings or landmarks meant for cars. Next, people wanted more elevation and more mountain roads. Now, I'm stuck between saying that this has been addressed or saying that it's mixed. On the one hand, we have the highest elevation peak in any game, and we also have the 2 longest mountain roads in any game. But Horizon 5's volcano kinda stands alone, and I don't think I'm alone in thinking that the majority of Horizon 5's map actually feels pretty flat. Where in contrast, Horizon 4's map didn't have that same extreme elevation, but did have a lot more things like rolling hills and valleys to break up the sightlines and add more variety to the landscape as a whole. Honestly, it could go either way. I think if you look at this statistically, yeah, Horizon 5 has more elevation and better mountain roads. But something about Horizon 4 just felt better in that regard. I don't know. I'm going to say that this one has been addressed, actually, because they clearly did acknowledge and do something about this. And now our final category is DLC. People asked for more value out of expansions, things like more cars and bigger maps. I'm going to say that this one hasn't really been addressed. The DLC maps don't feel that much bigger. I mean, in pure size, sure, Hot Wheels and Rally Adventure are bigger than some previous maps, but when they're contained in their own separate areas, they just don't really feel that much bigger or smaller than something like Blizzard Mountain from Horizon 3. And this brings us to perhaps the biggest feature request I had for Horizon 5 that did not get answered. DLC maps still don't connect to the main map. I hate this. It breaks up the experience and turns the DLC maps into complete ghost towns shortly after they release. Horizon 6 needs to be able to expand the main map. Now, let's wrap up the DLC category with a kind of funny one here. Players in Horizon 4 said they were done with the toy-themed expansions. And, well, we know how that went. So with the map and DLC categories covered, let's take a look at our final score. Now, even though the original community thread had about 90 total suggestions, I grouped quite a few together in that original video and consolidated it even more today. So in total, we have 52 ideas that my community wanted to see addressed in Forza Horizon 5. Of those, 29 were not delivered on, 6 were partially addressed, and 17 were fully delivered on. And I've gotta say, that's better than I thought. You know, although some of these wishes were very much more realistic and definitely things I think should have been focused on, a lot of the ideas here were also just kind of pie in the sky wishful thinking. And it's completely unrealistic to expect any studio to be able to deliver on every single wish every player has. So I think to see over a third of this list make its way into Horizon 5 is not bad. And of course, Horizon has improved in a lot of other ways that weren't mentioned here. So ultimately, I think it's important to realize just how many changes have been made between these two games that do feel on the surface pretty similar. I am certainly still bummed to see things like multiplayer or social features or car customization not quite get the love that they should have though. And if you want another interesting video, I also talked about all the features that were removed in Horizon 5. So check that one out for a very different perspective here, and start getting your Horizon 6 wishlist together, because I think it's time soon to start thinking about what that game might look like. Thanks all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.